Hey there, I'm Harley Finkelstein. I'm an entrepreneur, the president of Shopify, and I am ready to start digging deep.
I'm Mark Sutcliffe. Welcome to Digging Deep, presented by Zen Books and Abacus Data. I'm really excited about our guest today, Harley Finkelstein. This is the latest in our series of one-on-one conversations with thoughtful, accomplished people in many different fields. Really smart, interesting people, astronauts, Olympic champions, entrepreneurs, musicians, television hosts, and more. We explore their stories, their challenges, their defining moments, and we all get to learn the powerful lessons from them that we can apply to our own lives. Here's how we do it. We start off with some rapid-fire questions that reveal little pieces of information about the guest, and then we start digging deep into those stories and life lessons. Again, our guest today is Harley Finkelstein, the president of Shopify. I have a very vivid memory of the first time I met Harley. I was moderating a panel of entrepreneurs at an event, and Harley was one of the speakers, and he was absolutely fantastic. He was energetic and passionate. He had terrific insights and stories to share. Now, this was back when Shopify was a very small company. It was actually operating above a restaurant in Ottawa's Byward Market. They were about to move to a slightly larger location, and they were hoping to reach 100 employees. Now, of course, Shopify employs thousands of people around the world, and it has become a billion-dollar company. There are many things that I respect and admire about Harley. He is a relentless learner. He's really thoughtful and analytical, which is why he makes a terrific guest for this podcast. We talk about the lessons he learned from his grandparents who escaped the Holocaust. We talk about some very difficult times in his life and how he adapted and persevered. We talk about how he effectively competes for his own job every year. We talk about self-awareness and getting very comfortable with being uncomfortable, about his approach to decision-making, about mentorship, about making entrepreneurship more accessible, and what he has learned from fatherhood. I think you will find this is a fascinating and incredibly wide-ranging and interesting conversation. Now, one last thing before we get started. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and post a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, and share this podcast with your network. And if you're looking for more information about the show, if you want to read my daily blog, where I post every single day of the year, or subscribe to my newsletter, The Weekly Dig, which has 5 very quick items I've learned about or am thinking about each week, please go to our website, letsdigdeep.com. That is letsdigdeep.com. You can also find a link to my TEDx talk. Now, let's start digging deep with Harley Finkelstein. Harley, it's so great to welcome you. Thank you for doing this. Great to see you. You know, I will talk more about this later, but I was reflecting before we got hooked up today about the first time I met you, which was a long time ago, and it was a panel discussion with a group of entrepreneurs, and it was not long after you had joined Shopify, and I remember you telling me about your plan to get to 100 employees. And at the time, you guys were located in an office
sounded
space.
So crazy at that point, right?
I know, yeah. And you guys were in an office space above a restaurant in the Byward Market here in Ottawa.
That's right, Tucker's Marketplace.
Yeah, and you were about to move to another space, which you then outgrew, and then you moved to another space, and so on. And it's. But I have really cherished the opportunity to talk with you so often over the years, and to hear your insights into entrepreneurship, and you are such a passionate advocate for it. So I'm really delighted to have you on the show. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for saying that. You know, one of the things you've also played a serious role of is sort of being the perpetual fan and the perpetual ambassador and supporters of entrepreneurs, both in Ottawa, but frankly across Canada. And you have given us all a vehicle and a soapbox of which to tell our entrepreneurial stories, which frankly, I think has led to a lot more people being encouraged to do so. I think a lot about mentorship when it comes to entrepreneurship. And most people assume mentorship is just about some tactics or advice. But actually, the idea of mentorship being, if I see someone else doing something, I then believe I can do it myself. And I think you've been incredibly effective in helping us do that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And I think you're very right about that. So we will talk a lot about entrepreneurship, but let's start with some of our rapid fire questions. So What is your fondest childhood memory?
Uh, Cottaging. Remember the first time going to our little cottage? It was a trailer in the parking lot of a little ski mountain north of Montreal. But being there was again at the time felt like the greatest thing ever, and being able to walk outside my door and jump onto the ski hill, I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. And I do it now with my family.
Awesome. Who was your hero when you were 10 years old?
Probably this is probably so embarrassing. It was probably someone like MC Hammer or Vanilla Ice. That's when I really got into hip hop, when I was about 10.
Okay. And what did you think you were going to be when you grew up?
I think DJ was probably what I thought for a great deal of time. And shockingly, I went to law school, but never thought I'd be a lawyer. So that was never even the cards. But it's probably a DJ when I was a lot earlier, or at least something around starting something. So maybe entrepreneur is a better way to describe that.
Okay. What is your life story in 6 words?
Make no small plans. It's 4 words, but
Make no small plans. Okay, I like it. What is your greatest mistake and what did you learn from it?
there's a lot of mistakes. I'm trying to run through it. I know some of your guests reviewed these questions in advance. I did not. So this is really off the cuff. Probably some not understanding, like having a bad sense of self or a lack of self-awareness. I think that my lack of self-awareness for the majority of my 20s, frankly, probably my teenage years also, but certainly in my 20s, a lack of self-awareness was a really bad thing. And it led to some really big mistakes, like not being able to hire properly, not being able to ascertain what is legitimate and what is not.
For what do you feel most grateful?
My family.
What has been the best year of your life so far and why?
This one, and hopefully every single subsequent one. I believe in progress. I'm certainly a growth-minded person, and because of that, I hope that each year that I want to be embarrassed by looking back a couple years every year.
Yeah. What has been the toughest year of your life so far and why?
I would probably say when I was 17, my dad wasn't around. Family lost everything. I was a new student at McGill. I just moved to Montreal from South Florida, where I was living with my family. Moved to McGill, lost everything, had to support myself. That was certainly the worst year of my life. That's where I would, when I work on with my therapist, that was sort of my trauma happened that year. And it was also the year that I really became an entrepreneur. So maybe there's a bit of a two-sided coin there.
As there often is, right? There's
almost always.
Yeah. What one person has had the greatest impact on your life?
Probably Phil Reimer, who some of you may know. He's a lawyer in Ottawa. He's been a mentor of mine since I was 15, convinced me to go to law school. And probably Toby. Probably Phil and Toby would be the two people.
What is the most important lesson that you would want to share with other people?
Get really, really comfortable with being uncomfortable.
What's the biggest factor that led you to where you are today?
Perseverance, hustle, unrelenting ambition.
What would people be most surprised to learn about you?
I cry at movies.
So do I. I'm more likely to cry at something meaningful than something sad. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
By that? Yeah.
Oh, like a story of for me, because of my relation with my dad, like some dad's son kind of, story for the ages kind of thing. Oh my gosh, I will cry like a baby.
What is your secret talent?
Well, it's also a secret anymore, but DJing was for a while. Right. I've been in Ottawa since 2005, and for a while, no one even knew I was DJing. Now it feels like the cat's out of the bag. So DJing. Other than that, I have the entire first 3 seasons of Peppa Pig memorized. I'm not sure that's a talent, but that's something.
Yeah. Can you do any of the voices?
I cannot. I'm not a voice guy, but yeah. Although
Yeah.
I always find Daddy Pig in Peppa Pig is always portrayed as sort of almost like Peter Griffin from Family Guy type character. I always thought that was somewhat derogatory.
Yeah, the dads in comedy are there's
almost
a lot of
Homer Simpson. It's all sort of the same, almost prototype.
Yeah. What's the most fun you've ever had?
Man, my life's full of fun. I just started mountain biking. We have a place in Sault Ste. Marie, which is not too far from here. And we were there this summer quite a bit. And I started mountain biking, and oh my gosh, going mountain biking down some of these trails at 40 kilometers an hour is some of the most fun I've ever had in my life.
What's the scariest thing you've ever done?
Go to law school.
What is your boldest prediction for the future?
Education is going to be completely disrupted. Traditional education is going to be completely changed.
Interesting. If you were to deliver a commencement address, what would be the message?
Get really comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Okay. What has been a recent epiphany for you? Something about which maybe you've changed your mind.
Work from home is really great.
Okay. You wouldn't have thought that before?
I didn't think that before.
Yeah.
The first 3 months of the pandemic, working from home was not great for me. It was some dark times for me, actually. I'm a power extrovert. I need people, but I've now created a new system and a new structure around working from home that is, uniquely mine with Lindsay and my daughters and Shopify and the way that I interact with friends now. I've completely done a 180 on it. In fact, I can't see myself working in an office again.
Wow. What book are you most likely to recommend to others?
Right now, it's a book called Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb. And it's just the perfect book for being in the middle of a crazy pandemic crisis. It feels like for me, it's the COVID book, because it's all about what happens when most times when you drop something, it breaks. So it's fragile. And the opposite is robust. When you drop it, it doesn't break. But Nassim Taleb talks about a third system, which is called an anti-fragile system, where when you drop it and it breaks, it actually comes back stronger. And I think that's what I'm seeing here from so many entrepreneurs, so many people right now.
Wow. Harley, thank you for answering those questions. In just
That's a cool way to start. I like that.
Yeah.
That's fun.
In just a moment, we'll start digging deep with Harley Finkelstein. We're just going to take a quick break so I can tell you a little bit more about the presenting sponsor of Digging Deep, ZenBooks. ZenBooks is Canada's go-to cloud accounting firm. They are not your typical accounting firm. I know the founders, Colin and Eric. I've worked with them for several years. And here's why I think you should consider working with them too. First of all, they bring a fresh, unique, modern approach to what is a very old-fashioned industry. These guys were working remotely and in the cloud long before it became cool. ZenBooks also uses technology to your advantage. I think this is really important. They give you the tools and analysis you need to monitor your business in real time. That's so valuable right now when everything changes so quickly. Yes, they're a virtual accounting firm, but that doesn't mean they're offshore, and it doesn't mean they're inattentive. ZenBooks combines the efficiency and effectiveness of a cloud accounting service with all the benefits that you'd want from a trusted advisor, high-level advice, and strategic support. Now, here's what I think is going to happen if you work with ZenBooks. You'll probably start out taking advantage of their cutting-edge cloud accounting solutions, but in the long run, I think you'll stay with them because of their strategic guidance and problem solving. Among their core values, they specifically list being candid and proactive. Isn't that exactly what you want from a trusted advisor? Look, even if you're already working with an accountant or a bookkeeper, or you have some accounting staff on your team, I think you should still talk to ZenBooks and learn more about their tools and their expertise. Check out ZenBooks at zenbooks.ca. That's zenbooks.ca. Digging Deep is all about helping you make better decisions, and so is Abacus Data. Most leaders struggle to connect with and engage their audiences. Why is that? It's because they aren't sure how they think and feel and how they will react. Abacus Data can give you the strategic insights you need to make better decisions and to make them confidently. Here's a good example. A major national union was recently negotiating a new agreement for its thousands of members. This had the potential to be a very difficult process. There were many competing interests. So they brought in Abacus Data to conduct thorough and detailed research of their members to learn exactly where they stood, what they were thinking, what they wanted. And as a result, they were able to secure a strong new deal that was accepted overwhelmingly in a national vote. Abacus Data helps all of its clients understand what's really happening in the minds of their employees, clients, and stakeholders. They help them avoid costly blind spots. And they're really good at what they do. In fact, Abacus Data was one of the most accurate pollsters in the 2019 Canadian federal election. Make the one decision that will improve all of your other decisions. Let Abacus Data help you move forward with confidence and clarity. Go to abacusdata.ca. That's abacusdata.ca. Harley, once again, great to have you on Digging Deep. And I wanted to talk a little bit about your family history, because you have a fascinating family history. And I think it is on many levels the foundation for you becoming an entrepreneur, and not just becoming an entrepreneur, but becoming the entrepreneur that you are. So I understand that your grandfather moved to Canada. And I always think of immigration stories as entrepreneurial because they are giant risks, right? That's really what immigrants do. Can you tell me a little bit about your family background?
Yeah. So my paternal grandparents, my father's parents, they were both in Auschwitz. They were both in the Holocaust. They're both survivors. They were pretty much the only surviving members of their family on both sides. And after the Holocaust and so they escaped from the concentration camp and made their way to Hungary. And then that's in the 40s. In the 50s, Hungarian Revolution happened, and Hungary was no longer a safe place either. And so Canada had this program where they were going to let 40,000 Hungarian immigrants into the country in 1956. And my grandmother and grandfather and my father and his three siblings came to Canada. They ended up landing by boat in Montreal. And he didn't call himself an entrepreneur ever. This is my grandfather I'm talking about, but he had very few choices. He was not able to get a job. He didn't speak the language. He didn't really speak English. He had no money, but somehow he was able to get himself a little stall at the Jean Talon farmers market in Montreal, which is still there today. And it was called Le Capitaine. And it was an egg stall. He sold eggs. He developed a relationship with a farmer who had eggs and started selling these eggs. And he was able to, through that venture, through that little business, that small business, he was able to put food on the table and put a roof over the heads of my dad's family. And the reason that that's an important story for me is because that is the first time in hearing that story that I appreciated that entrepreneurship was a way to find independence. It was a way to solve a problem. It was a way to self-actualize. It was a way to survive. And so he ran this little, farmer's market stall until he died a couple of years ago. And actually my uncle now today still runs the Le Capitaine stall at the Jean Talon market. If anyone's listening in Montreal, it's still there. He's open 7 days a week. And watching him sort of become a self-starter, I think was incredibly valuable to me growing up, because I grew up around people that didn't have sort of traditional 9-to-5 jobs. My father, when he came of age after college, he started a clothing company in Charbonneau, which is the Montreal garment district. And so I watched people around me use entrepreneurship. My maternal grandmother, when she turned, I think it was 50, my grandfather was thinking of stop working, and she wanted some, frankly, independence. She wanted to find her own self. And so she started a textile company in Montreal. And so I grew up with these entrepreneurs around me. Not a single one of them ever used the term entrepreneur, which is a fascinating thing, because if you were to word cloud my vocabulary or my speeches or my talks or anything that I do, the largest word in the word cloud would be entrepreneur, but no one in my family ever talked about that.
Yeah, and that is interesting, because it speaks to the fact that being an entrepreneur today is probably a lot more of a choice than it was for your ancestors and mine, right? That it was more driven by necessity. It wasn't a career path, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So let's talk about your father. You mentioned that you get emotional about father-son stories in movies, and I know you mentioned as well, you went through a very tough time when you were 17, and that was the basis for you, out of necessity, having to be very independent. Can you just walk through kind of what happened with your family and with your dad?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I was born in Montreal, and then around the time I was 12 or 13. My family decided to move down to South Florida. And so we moved to a place called Boca Raton, which is a nice place to retire, not a great place to be if you're a young person. There's a lot of golf courses and stuff.
Yeah, that's the first thing I think of when you say Boca, right?
Yeah,
like,
it's. I mean, it's almost like Del Boca Vista is sort of a Seinfeld meme.
Yeah.
So we moved down there. What was neat about this particular area was that one of the best public high schools in America was in this area. It was called Spanish River High School. But you had to live in a particular geography in an area of the city to go there, because it was all based on where you lived and where you'd go to school. And my parents, who didn't have a lot of money, were able to find a home in that area, a smaller home than, frankly, I think we may have had the smallest house in that area, but it enabled me to go to that particular school. And it was an amazing school. It was a public school, 4,000 kids. I had never gone to public school. I went to Jewish parochial school previously in Montreal. So it was sort of a big wake-up call for me, but it was a great experience. And then after high school, I applied to a bunch of schools. My first choice school was Brandeis, which is in Waltham, Massachusetts. And my second choice school was McGill. And Brandeis would have required me going into debt because my parents didn't have that kind of money. And McGill, because I was born in Montreal, was like $1,800 a month, or sorry, $1,800 a year. It was like the best deal ever. And if you've ever been a 17-year-old in Montreal, you know what an incredible place that is. It is a special, special place. The idea of being able to go to a bar when I was 17 years old, even though I wasn't of age, is so commonplace in Montreal. But of course, in the States, it's a really big deal to do something like that. So that it would never happen. So I move up to Montreal, and within the first month of school, September 11th happens. Markets start spinning, and my dad got into a lot of financial trouble. And it was partially it was him making some really bad decisions, and partially it was the market just wasn't a great time. And my mom called me one morning. It must have been October or so of my first year, and she said, effectively, we're broke. We got nothing. You should move back down to South Florida. And I remember thinking, there is no way I'm leaving Montreal. I loved it. It was the fall or the autumn season. It was beautiful there. And I just loved the independence of me being away from home. And so I said, look, instead of me coming down there, I'm going to stay in Montreal, and I'll figure out a way to not only support myself, but also find a way to help all of you. And I have two much younger sisters, one who's 10 years younger than me, the other that is 3 years younger than me. So I sort of have always, I'm the quintessential big brother in the family. And that phone call from my mom kind of changed my life, because it meant that I was 17. It meant that I was going to be on my own for the rest of my life. And I wasn't sure, and I wasn't ready for that. I didn't necessarily know what the next move was. And so, of course, like, any normal person, I decided I'd go get a job. And so I got a job at a travel agency. I was DJing a lot on weekends. I was DJing almost every weekend in Montreal. And between the travel agency and the DJing, I thought I'd be able to make enough money to help my family and help myself. And that was possible, but it required me to have a reduced course load, which I didn't want to do. I thought the idea of being a full-time student concurrently while working is the right setup. I didn't want to spend 5 years in undergrad or 6 years in undergrad, like some people have to do. So it was clear to me that was not going to work. And I ended up quitting the travel agency because, again, it was getting in the way of classes. I kept the DJing thing up, but I thought about starting a business, because I thought, hey, wouldn't it be amazing if I were able to build something that generated revenue while I was in class? And the only thing you can build that generates revenue when you're not actually working hour to hour is a business. I mean, that's the entire concept of what a company does. And I was very, very fortunate that serendipitously I met someone who was on the student council at McGill University and told me that McGill buys lots of t-shirts. And I just sort of quickly connected the dots that, oh, okay, t-shirts, McGill, I'm a student at McGill. I knew a bunch of people in sort of the garment district. This is around the time where Dove Charney, who was a Montreal entrepreneur, was just starting American Apparel. And I mean, that's a whole different story of what happened to American Apparel longer
Sure.
term. But at the time, Dove was, a Montreal Jewish kid starting a t-shirt company. I was living in Montreal as a Jewish kid. And there was enough there were enough data points or enough dots that I was able to connect them and say, okay, I think I'm going to do this. And I went to McGill shortly after and said, hey, I own a t-shirt company. I didn't. And I can make lots of t-shirts for you. I couldn't. But hey, give me your t-shirt order. And McGill effectively told me that there was no way they were going to give me a t-shirt order because I was untested. And eventually, with enough perseverance and enough strategy, McGill eventually gave me a t-shirt order probably 3 or 4 months after that first interaction. And I bought a screen printing machine, taught myself how to screen print. And I remember getting that first contract from McGill. It wasn't very much. It may have been, $10,000 or $12,000, but that totally changed my life. At that very moment, I felt independence. I felt purpose. I felt that I knew how to get through these next couple of years, these very difficult years when my family had no money, my dad wasn't around, just bad situation. And I spent the rest of my undergrad building this little t-shirt company. And we built it to a point where a lot of universities, there's about 98 accredited universities in Canada. And I think about half of them at one point or another gave us a t-shirt contract. In fact, funny enough, the University of Ottawa was buying t-shirts from me. But I got rejected from the MBA program. And I always thought that was so ironic. This is a couple of years later when I was in law school, but it was ironic to me that I wasn't good enough to get into their MBA program, but I was good enough to get, thousands and thousands of dollars of t-shirt contracts. But that was that first year. This is 2001. And that's when things, in many ways got really tough for me, but in also many ways I sort of found myself and figured out what my life's work is going to be, which was entrepreneurship.
And that feeling you described, that feeling of independence and empowerment, that's the feeling that I know you really place a lot of value on, that Shopify creates for so many of its clients, right? That they're taking a product online and you're giving them the platform to do that and have that independence, right?
That's totally right. So if we fast forward a little bit, finished undergrad, a mentor of mine who I mentioned earlier, Phil Reimer, convinces me that I may want to consider law school, not to become a lawyer, which he is. He's a great lawyer, but become a better entrepreneur. And of course, he happened to be teaching law at the University of Ottawa in 2005. And so I applied to all of one law school, which was the University of Ottawa. And I get in and I moved to Ottawa. And I don't know anybody in the city. I don't know a friend or family. I've never even been to Ottawa in my life. And I move here, start law school, with the intention of really only using the skill sets, the lessons, the learnings of law school to become a better entrepreneur. That was always the goal. And in fact, it was so much the goal that and the way that it manifests itself is I think that I didn't make a lot of friends in law school because I've always felt like an outsider. I think I felt like an outsider to them. They felt like an outsider to me. They were all trying to get big jobs on Bay Street and they were all doing, big research projects. And I just wanted to learn how to negotiate better, how to critical reason, how to write better, how to read 4,000 pages, but pick out the one line that matters. That's what law school was there. It was finishing school for entrepreneurship. And I didn't know that it was going to be that effective. But it totally was. But the thing that law school had that undergrad did not is you have to show up for class in law school. In undergrad, you did not. At McGill, I was able just to show up for the exam, take the exam. And if I did well, I did well. Law school does have more attendance-based grading that uses the Socratic method. And I needed a way to, so the t-shirt business that I had in undergrad was not going to do very well in law school because it required that I take these trips to go to Dalhousie and UBC and Western. And I had to go meet these universities to get them to sign the contract for these t-shirts. But as luck would have it, when I moved to Ottawa, again, not having any friends or family, I had found out that a group of entrepreneurs hung out at a local coffee shop in the Glebe. I think it's on 2nd or 3rd Avenue. It's still there today. It's a bridgehead. And this is when Invest Ottawa was called Oakry. And I think someone at Oakry had said, oh, there's a bunch of entrepreneurs that hang out every Friday night. And I was just looking to make friends. I didn't have any friends here, so I just wanted to meet some people. And my tribe has always been entrepreneurs. And so I wanted to know where the entrepreneurs hung out. And I walked into this coffee shop and I met, it was Paul Lem, who's founder of Spartan Bioscience, and Aiden from Fellow and Fluid. It was Sam Zaid from Get Around. It was Luke Levesque from Travel Pod, and it was Toby. And Toby was just transitioning from the snowboard business, the snowboard shop that he started, to the software company, realizing the software he had written for the snowboard business was likely more valuable than the snowboard business itself. And I told him that I was looking to move my t-shirt business online so it can be a virtual business. And I want to move away from a wholesale business, a B2B business, to more of a B2C business, a consumer business, because I felt that would allow me to go to school and take classes and show up for class, and the online store would just be running in the back. And I became one of Shopify's first customers. I coded up my little t-shirt shop called Smoofer, sitting in tax law class with a great professor named Vern Krishna, who lives around the corner from me here in Ottawa. And we often joke about how distracted I was in his class. But the aha moment about Shopify happened in that tax law class. I had a little bit of money. I was able to pay my tuition and pay my rent and help my mom and sisters. I had a little bit of experience because I had this t-shirt business. But in a matter of an hour or two in this class, I was able to set up a store on Shopify. I think I was store 136 or something like that. So one of the first few stores on the platform. And I was able to build an online business that within a matter of months was competing against Walmart. And that aha moment was this idea that we can democratize entrepreneurship, that we can give anyone with ambition the tools in which to convert that ambition to a real business. And that business may do for them what it's doing for me, which is it's giving me freedom, independence, self-worth, confidence. It's helping me support not only myself, but my family. And the t-shirt business, the Smoofer, the online t-shirt business, it was a good business. It wasn't, a massive company, but it made enough that it paid the bills. But again, it did what I needed to do, which was I needed it to run on its own virtually while I was finishing law school. And the fact that I was buying sub licenses to different t-shirt companies, like different brands like Marvel and DC Comics, like the Batman Dark Knight license or the Superman license, and it's still almost unbelievable that software gave me this tool of which to compete with the largest retailer in the country, which at the time was Walmart.
Yeah.
And so when I finished school, I finished law school, and then I went to business school. Eventually the MBA program let me in after enough of, I don't know what happened. I think someone realized this is ridiculous, that we're going to give him a t-shirt contract, but we won't let him in because, his grades aren't good enough. So after business school and after law school, I realized that whatever I do next, it has to be in entrepreneurship. And I moved out to Toronto in 2008 to article at a law firm. Hated it. Thought working in a law firm was just the worst way to work. Entrepreneurship to me was such a meritocracy, and the law firm environment was such a legacy type environment. It was all about how many years you've been there, who you know, what your last name is, who your father golfs with. My father wasn't golfing with anyone. So like, I didn't fit in there. And I didn't like the fact that I had to wait my turn, that it wasn't about merit. It was about time spent. And so I called Toby back in 2009 and I said, I want to join you and Daniel and Cody. And I want to help take this idea, this piece of software, and I want to bring it to the world. And I want to really level the playing field and make entrepreneurship accessible. And that's the mission that I've been on now for the last, 11 years.
What I really admire about you, Harley, is the fact that the skills required to play a leadership role in Shopify 9 years ago, 10 years ago, would be totally different from the skills you would require today. It's a totally different company now. It's so much larger. And yet you and Toby and others have adapted. And it reminds me of that quote about how being an entrepreneur is like jumping off a cliff and building a parachute on the way down. How have you been able to adapt, and what have you learned about learning on the fly, which is what you've basically been doing? You've been learning on the job for the last decade, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you said jumping off a cliff and building a parachute midway, which is probably a more graphic way to describe which is like I always say it's like fixing an airplane mid-flight.
Right.
Yours is more dramatic. Maybe I'll use that from now on. A
Mine is
couple
what
things. First
happens
of
if
all,
you can't fix the airplane.
if you can't fix it, I guess that's true.
Yeah.
Although I guess the end result of both our metaphors are exactly the same, which is
Yeah.
a crash landing. We believe deeply that, and certainly Toby and I do, but I think most people at Shopify that are in leadership positions believe this, that we have to requalify for our jobs every single year. Now, that is a pretty heavy thing to digest. The fact that I need to be the very best candidate for this role relative to every other candidate on the planet each and every year. And at some point, if I'm not, then I deserve to lose that role, to lose that privilege of being the president of Shopify, or previously the chief operating officer of Shopify. So one, in the rapid fire questions we did, I mentioned twice this idea of being really, really comfortable with being uncomfortable. Nothing makes you more uncomfortable like knowing that you have to continuously requalify, that what got you to this point will not get you to the next point. And I think in the early years, I was scared of that. It gave me anxiety. It made me fearful. Whereas now, because I've gotten so comfortable with being uncomfortable, it motivates me. It inspires me to keep getting better. And I always had this idea in the back of my head when I was chief operating officer, that what would happen if Sheryl Sandberg walked in and said, "Hey, Toby, I want to be COO." Sheryl may not be the best COO, but she's pretty iconic in the tech world for being the COO of Facebook. I need to be so good that if Sheryl Sandberg walked in the door and said, "I want to be COO," the Toby would be like, "Sorry, I got the best COO ever for Shopify. His name is Harley." That may seem like putting a lot of pressure on yourself. It is not for me. It is so motivating. It is so inspiring that I get to do that. I remember around 2015, we went public in May 2015, but around January 4th, let's say, 2015, we decided that we wanted to take the company public. It was going to be a dual listing, both New York Stock Exchange and the Toronto Stock Exchange. And I remember thinking, like, the day after, oh my gosh, I have no idea how to, one, take this company public or how to run a public company. I mean, like, Shopify is effectively the first job I've ever had. And so I did what I always do, which is, all right, who are the best people doing this? What are the right books, the right podcasts? Who are the right mentors in my life? Who are the right advisors that I need? Who should I be having coffee with more often now than before? And I did that. We were sort of in the same cohort as a couple other great companies in Silicon Valley that went public. At the time, I think it was like Zendesk had gone public around that time. New Relic had gone public around that time. HubSpot had gone public around that time. We had people on our board of directors who had run public companies as well. And so I just, I use that model, which is, you become the 5 people you surround yourself with. And so if you want to be a great leader of a public company, find other great leaders of public companies and try to learn from them. And now on the professional side, I do that, but on the personal side, I've done that too. Before Bailey was born in 2016, I had called up a bunch of people that I thought were just phenomenal parents, great dads. And some of them may have not been as good as I thought they were, but there was something about them and their relationship with their children that I really admired. And some of them are people here in Ottawa, guys like Ken Aegis, who runs Paramount Properties here in Ottawa. I've always admired his relation with his children. They have this great dynamic. And so I called Ken and started spending more time with Ken. When I got married to Lindsay in 2013, I started looking around who were some of the people that I thought had really wonderful relationships. One of those people was Steve Bechta, his relationship to his wife, Maureen, and started spending more time with Steve to understand, how does he always show up there? How does he always show up for Maureen in such a positive, empathetic, caring way, but also, still focused on being a great entrepreneur? And so that, whether it's the IPO or it's getting married or having kids, the way that I learn tends to be less from textbook and more from actual people in my life. And I've been really fortunate as time goes on to have access to world-class people. And they've all been very gracious and generous with their time. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons that I'm generous with my time.
So do you seek those people out? Some of them obviously would come from your network, but do you actually go looking for people you've never met before who have more expertise than you in a particular area that will be about where you're going with Shopify next, and say, look, I need your time. I need to borrow from you. I need to ask you a lot of questions.
Yep, I do. And I'm constantly doing that at any given time. My iMessage app on my phone and my desktop looks like it's kind of a ridiculous thing because any given day there may be 50 text messages going back and forth across a whole different SWAT of different industries and different types of people. I'm constantly seeking them out. I decided through the pandemic and through me spending more time at home that I really want to get back into DJing a lot more often. So I've sought out DJs that I've met on my path, Mick Boogie or A-Track, people that I've met before. And so I have their numbers or I have their information. And I know this sounds really name droppy, but I'm not trying to do that. I really just want to explain that anyone that's listening to this, if you're learning a new skill, whether it's professional or personal, or a new hobby, or you want to get into running, I know Mark, you wrote a book about that too. I would suspect that anyone who's getting into running, if they message you and they message you in a compelling way that shows interest and curiosity and care and doesn't feel like they're trying to sell you something, you're probably going to respond to them. Well, think about doing that at scale. And think about doing that with anyone you want. Someone from Texas may write you, Mark, and say, hey, I read your book about running and I want to learn more about that. I've always done that and I continue to do that. It's one of the reasons that I talk a lot about mentors. I've had mentors since I was a kid because even as a child, I was always curious about, I remember when I was like 10 or 11, Warren Buffett at that point. So that's probably in the, mid 90s, 92 or 93, I was 10 or 11. And I remember hearing about Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway and what that was. And I remember asking, like, I think it was like my pediatrician or something. He was really into investing. And it's like, hey, is there a book that I should read about Warren Buffett? And he gave me a book called The Warren Buffett Way. And I don't even know where that book is, and I probably didn't read the whole book because I was 10 or 11, but I remember just like skimming through it. I think that curiosity about meeting interesting people, learning from them, has always been something that I've had. And not everyone does it that way. I mean, Toby, for example, always has tons of books on his Kindle or next to his bed. He's a incredible reader. I don't read that way. I'll pick up a book, I'll read a couple pages, pick it up again, maybe put it down, maybe find something else. I'll kind of jump around. Where I really learn is by meeting and learning from people.
Yeah, it's very experiential, right? For you, I think.
Even Lindsay, my wife's an entrepreneur. She owns an ice cream shop called Sunday School. And even when she was getting up and running, she was reading a lot of books about ice cream and the Ben & Jerry's story and Haagen-Dazs story. And at some point I'm like, hey, just, you can reach out to Ben or Jerry, or Haagen-Dazs. And to me, that was so obvious, but even Lindsay, who spends, more time with me than anyone else does in the world. I noticed that people are hesitant to do that. They don't want to waste other people's time, or they fear rejection. I have no fear of rejection. I've never had any fear of rejection. That's not to say I don't have insecurity, or sometimes I don't feel rejected, but I don't have a fear of rejection.
Yeah, and it is amazing how many people say yes when you reach out to them the right way. That is, people would be shocked at who's willing to just have that conversation, because most people want to help, right? They see someone and they think, yeah, if I can pass on my wisdom, why not, right? What else is there?
Right. Yeah, I always think about that. Like, even if it's just an intro call, what is something that I can tell them that they would find valuable? So if nothing else, that they get some value out of the conversation. Maybe it's a piece of insight that I've seen. Maybe it's someone that I think they should connect with. Maybe it's a particular place that they should be thinking about relative to their own business. And by doing that, by showing care, by maybe giving them something that you found buried deep in a white paper they wouldn't have seen themselves, you'd be surprised of how quickly they're going to give you something back.
So I want to ask a bunch of questions just about how you do things and what you've learned, things like how you handle stress and tension, how you make decisions, that sort of thing. But you brought up your family. How did becoming a father change you?
Wow. That's a journey that I'm still on right now. I have a 4-year-old, and so Bailey's almost 4 and Bailey's 4 and Zoe's almost 2. And I was not ready for that at all. I've been running so fast for so damn long, for most of my life that kids require you to slow down. And I'm so grateful that they forced me to slow down, but slowing down, hitting the brakes at that particular time was really, really challenging. And then I just realized, well, okay, what are the skill sets I need to be a good father? And it's not, ambition. It's not hustle. It's patience. It's mindfulness. It's, understanding. And I just, those things didn't necessarily come to me organically or naturally. I had to sort of pick those things up. And I remember when Bailey was first born, and Lindsay was kind of still still very much in the, she was breastfeeding at that time. It was very much sort of the newborn phase. I remember just sitting there on the couch at 4:00 in the morning. Lindsay's next to me breastfeeding. I'm just sitting there and I'm like, what am I doing here? Like I'm so useless. It just felt completely useless. I felt, I wasn't creating value. I wasn't adding anything to this dynamic. I was just kind of this. And I remember Lindsay telling me, no, you're not, this is not useless. You sitting here with me at 4:00 in the morning is actually everything right now. It's the most important thing you could be doing because you're showing care. It's showing that we are a partnership, that we are in this together. And I didn't like that I couldn't quantify whether or not I was progressing as a dad or a husband for that matter. There's no dashboard. There's no quantifiable metric or key performance indicator or measurable business objective. There's none of those things. So keeping score is kind of challenging. And what you realize is sort of the score, keeps care of itself in when you're a parent or you're in a relationship. But I felt completely useless. I'm now kind of 4 years into fatherhood, and I still have those days where I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, I'm not adding any value. And what I realize is, no, I am adding value. Like getting up at 4:00 or 5:00 in the morning with one of the kids who's not feeling well and watching Peppa Pig with her. So Lindsay can sleep longer because she had a rough night with one of the other kids. That is adding value. But I had to sort of recondition myself and redefine what success looks like. And that has been a real struggle because on one hand, I know that's the right thing to do, but I was worried about, am I going to lose my hustle? Am I going to lose my energy about the business and entrepreneurship? And then then you start thinking about like the one level deeper is, well, self-identity. If I am Harley entrepreneur first, I also want to be Harley dad first and husband first. And how do all those things kind of balance themselves? And so that is one area that I certainly have not gotten right yet. It feels like it probably will always be a perpetual learning experience because I have yet to meet a parent that said, oh, I nailed it. I got it. It seems like we all sort of struggle in different ways. And your kids are a bit older than mine and you probably have different concerns than I do, which are, not them waking up at 4:00 in the morning or not them, not eating dinner, but, I don't know, boyfriends or girlfriends or something like that.
Not quite yet,
Right.
but it's more device time, that sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not there yet. That's right.
Yeah. So how do you strike that balance? How do you, because I know you made some conscious decisions. We've spoken about this before, that there were going to be windows in the evening where you were not going to be working. And that's got to be really tough in an environment where the expectation is you were the COO, now you're the president, but the expectation is you're available across different time zones to different people. And if something comes up, you've got to be there, but you carved out windows.
I started scheduling everything, and I mean everything. If you looked at my iCal or my Google Calendar, you'd see, meetings, and you'd see time to think, and you'd see, all the elements of my Shopify week. But you'd also see yoga time, exclamation mark. You'd also see workout with Anthony. I'm actually looking at my schedule right now. Workout with Anthony, exclamation mark. You would see a block starting at 4 p.m. on Friday afternoon called family time. You would see a walk with Lindsay, 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. I started scheduling just about everything because I found when I scheduled it, I was able to work with that schedule. And prior to that, I was only scheduling work things. And so everything else sort of had to fit in. But now what I realize is to be a sustainable human right now and lead Canada's largest company, but also be present at home, I need to have everything properly diarized so that I can accomplish things that I want. So that's the first thing. The second thing I did is I started to meditate. I'd had this thing that I didn't know what it was since I was a child. It turns out it was anxiety. I thought it was stomach pains. I thought it was just nerves. Maybe it's a combination of those things, but the fundamental issue is anxiety. And as my responsibilities at home and at work got bigger, my anxiety increased, especially increased during COVID. And we ended up hiring this guy named Pierre, who's a sort of a mindfulness coach at Shopify years ago. And I think I meditated a couple times at like different events and maybe some conferences where they brought in like, Jack Cornfield, or they brought in, some amazing guru. But I was looking for immediate gratification. I wanted to meditate for 20 minutes and then I wanted to be enlightened, and to try meditating for a day or two or for a couple of hours or for a week, let's say, every day. And you're not going to be enlightened.
Yeah. Doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way, but I committed to it. And, 4 years later, I meditate every morning. I don't think I've missed a day. I've not missed a day since March, since COVID started, because my anxiety had been elevated, but I've not missed very many days over the last 4 years. And often it's just, you can see me, the listeners can't see me, but right there, you'll see a little lounger chair behind me in my office. And I just sit there and I put on Insight Timer and I, hit the timer for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes, depending on how much time I have. And I just count my breaths. And that's been incredibly valuable to me. I know that I'm intense. So I like to run, not as much as you do, but I love to run. I find it clears my head. But I also know that if I left it to my own devices, I would run and do sort of these very intense workouts every day. And so, I do yoga one day, intense workout the next day, and then yoga the next day. And I sort of go back and forth between more of a mindful yoga practice and then more intense, high intensity interval training or something like that. And so that's part of it too. I try as much as possible not to have my phone always next to me in bed, although that's sometimes challenging too. But those are sort of the things that I've developed, and I've become religious about them. Friday nights, no matter where we are in the world, Lindsay and I have an amazing bottle of wine, and we have a great dinner together. And so we prioritize these things. And so none of these things are going to be mind-blowingly insightful, but all of them in aggregate with some consistency have led to what I feel is my own version of balance. I'm not sure it's balance in general. It's sort of the Harley version of balance, but it allows me to do this for the next, until someone fires me or I'm no longer around. I can do this because I get to do things that I consider life's work. Be a great dad, be a great husband, lead this amazing company, help entrepreneurs around the world.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think using your schedule that way, most people just use their schedule for work. And I've been guilty of that too. And then you just fit in the other stuff around it. And that's not good enough. What have you learned along the way about making good decisions, making better decisions?
I am action-oriented. I like to make good decisions quickly. Sometimes it's bad. A good example that some people may resonate with. When my wife brings me a problem, my immediate reaction is try to solve that problem. And
it's a very guy thing. I do that all the time too. Yeah,
totally. And my inability to just say, "Oh, that sucks. I understand where you're coming from." It's almost physiological. I have such a tough time doing it. And I'm working on it. And, Lindsay and I have been seeing couples therapy. We've been going to couples therapy together almost since we got married to sort of just make sure we have a solid foundation. And I have coaches and I have my own therapist and I have all these great important people in my life that help me on this journey, but I'm still really, really bad at that thing. So what I try to do now is when I have to make a really big decision, I sort of use, I think this is one of the Bezos sort of Amazon rules, but I decide whether it's a type 1 decision or type 2 decision. Type 1 decision is a decision that I really can't go back from. And a type 2 decision is one that, if it's a bad decision, I can always change it. So, deciding how I'm going to spend my weekend on a Monday. If it's the wrong decision, if Thursday comes and I don't want to go there, I can always decide, I don't want to go skiing. I want to stay home that weekend. So that's not that important. And I try to put all of my effort and all of my decision-making analysis into those type 1 decisions. And a type 1 decision is, not practicing law, because I can't go back, after after you don't practice law, you can never practice law ever again unless you go back to school. A type 1 decision is, for me at least, where I'm going to live. I guess I could move, but I'm going to plant roots there. A type 1 decision is anything that simply would be too difficult to do a 180 from. And once you sort of put those into those two buckets, you start realizing, okay, like what we have for dinner tonight, yeah, it's at the time seems like a big decision. It's not that big of a decision. So like, I'm not going to spend any of my thinking time on that. But figuring out something, helping decide whether or not Shopify should go into a new direction or not, whether Shopify should go public or not, how we go public or not go public. Those are decisions that I need to spend most of my cognitive, load on. And I try to focus on those things too. I also try to make decisions later in the day as much as possible. I know this is a little bit, of a meme going around right now, make decisions after 10 a.m., but I really do that. I try not to make decisions before 10 a.m. I find that usually I make better decisions in the afternoon than I do in the early morning.
Going back to that reaction to your spouse or somebody else bringing up a problem, I heard a great interview by Shane Parrish with Lisa Feldman Barrett of Northeastern University. And she said, when people come to you with a problem, the first thing you have to ask them is, do you want empathy or do you want a solution? And I thought that was so insightful.
Yeah. It's so great. And Shane's podcast is so wonderful.
Yeah.
He's such an insightful person and he has such great questions. But yeah, that's exactly right. Once you sort of know that, then you know exactly how to react.
I heard you talking once about having 100-year horizon for things, and I find that fascinating. This is something that really resonates with me. I've been thinking a lot about this, kind of instead of having your 1-year plan, having a 100-year plan, which is much more about the impact you're going to have in the world and what's going to be there when you're gone. What does that mean to you, and how do you sustain that in an environment where there is so much pressure? You're a publicly traded company now, quarterly results matter, and deals matter, all of those kinds of things. How do you sustain that outlook?
Well, first of all, it's a lens of which to ask. It's a lens of which to answer the questions on. If you use a 100-year horizon, I think you tend to make better decisions objectively. For everyone listening, just for a second, pretend like your current job, your current role, your current venture is the last job, venture, whatever you're ever going to have. The second you use that lens, you begin to make different decisions, because it doesn't really matter what happens the next 3 months. You're sort of thinking about 3 years or 13 years or 30 years. And I think if you want to, fundamentally, we're trying to do at Shopify from a mission perspective is we want to make entrepreneurship accessible. We think the world is better with more entrepreneurs and more diverse entrepreneurs and many entrepreneurs, many voices, not fewer voices. To do that, that is not something you can just do in a year or two. That is a global paradigm shifting movement. So there's no way for us to accomplish everything we want in the next 12 months or even the next 24 months. But once we start thinking about, okay, if we're going to be around for 100 years, what are the things we have to put in place now and practice now to allow us to have those opportunities later on? And it just, for us at least, it feels like a better way, a better, mental model of which to make decisions against. But also, it's a great thing to do in your personal life too. If you are thinking that you were going to live in a particular home for 100 years, you think differently about how you construct it. You think differently about how you design it. If you're thinking about your relationship, if you take away the fact that, you can get divorced and you can, and you go into the relationship assuming this is the last relationship you're ever going to have, you will make different decisions than if you have the optionality of simply walking away at some point when it gets hard. And I think that there is a real value to using that long-term horizon. But that being said, quarterly earnings have to come out. We have to put out our earnings report. We have to let Wall Street and our investors know how we did. We have to talk about our plans for the future. In a normal circumstance, we have to have guidance, although guidance has been suspended across pretty much every company now because of COVID. No one really knows exactly how to guide effectively given all the changes happening in the macro environment. So you can do both those things. You can provide visibility and you can provide results on a quarterly basis, but you can make decisions on a century basis. And I think those are the best, at least in my view, the companies that will be around the longest, that will have the largest impact, use a much longer time horizon. And the leaders that use, and the companies that use a shorter time horizon, they may have a couple peaks and they may, be hot for a minute or two, but ultimately they're never going to have any chance of outlasting a company that has 100-year vision. And we certainly do.
Can you give a quick example of that, either personal or professional?
Sure. So one of the things we're trying to do now, well, on a personal level, I can tell you, let's bring it back home to Ottawa. I moved here in 2005 to go to law school, but after, when I came back after articling, Lindsay moved back here with me, and it wasn't like, let's go to Ottawa for a couple of years and see where it goes. We studied whether or not Ottawa was a place that made sense for us longer term. Lindsay's family was in Montreal. We both love to be at the cottage. So there's this cottage country around. We both need to be in the US for friends, but also for work things. Well, it's easy to get to from there. We decided to, when we moved back here in 2009, that this was going to be our permanent home, that we were going to use a 100-year time horizon for Ottawa. What that allowed us to do is get really deep into the community. It wasn't just about Shopify. It wasn't just about what Lindsay was doing. It was about, how can we be leaders here? How can we help Ottawa get better? Who are the restaurateurs that we think are amazing and we want to invest our time or invest our money into? Who are the people that we think are really the leaders of the city that we want to get to know, and so we can act as a bit of maybe a force multiplier for their endeavors and their vision. On the company side, Shopify right now for most people is an e-commerce provider. It's a way to sell something on the internet. But long-term, we want to be the world's retail operating system. So without getting into too many details, some of the things we're doing right now may look interesting now, and they may say, oh, that's cool, I understand that. But in 5 or 10 or 30 years from now, that's going to be a major pillar of our business. We've been working on augmented reality for years and years now, and still augmented reality doesn't really play much of a role in retail and commerce, but we think it might. And so when it does, and if it does, we unequivocally will have something that will be of value at that point. And same sort of thing, by the way, at the 100 years, just beyond just marriage, but like personal relationships. If the people that I have, the people that I currently have in my life that are close friends, that are really important to me, these are friends that I'm going to have the rest of my life. And if I don't really want to have them in my life for the rest of my life for the next 100 years, they're probably not the people I'm going to spend much time with now. And I think that creates richer relationships.
It's very powerful. Harley, so much more I could ask you, but we're going to have to leave it there for today because of time. And I really am grateful for your time and respect your time. It's been terrific to have you on the podcast, and you know how much I respect you and admire you for what you've done, not just as an entrepreneur, but as an individual in the community that we both live in Ottawa, Canada. And I'm grateful that we've been able to continue to have these conversations on a regular basis over the years, going back to when you guys were just above a restaurant in the Byward Market, dreaming of one day having 100 employees. And it's such a thrill for me to see your dreams for Shopify coming true, as well as all you've done in your personal life. So thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Mutual Admiration Club. I admire everything you've done, and whether it's with the Business Journal or the books that you've done, or just being a city leader, it inspires the rest of us. So thank you for that.
I really wish I could have kept going with Harley, because there is still so much to cover, but perhaps we'll do that in a future episode. I really learned a lot from this discussion. I love Harley's approach to personal growth, about how when he wants to learn something new, he surrounds himself with people who know more than he does. That point about requalifying for your job every year is really insightful. I think that should be applied way more often. And thinking about life through the 100-year lens. That's something I've been thinking a lot about, and I try to apply whenever I can. So once again, thank you to Harley Finkelstein for joining us on Digging Deep. If you enjoyed this episode, please review it and share it with others. That's only going to help us produce more great episodes. And if you want to keep digging deep into topics and lessons like this, please subscribe to our weekly newsletter and read my blog at letsdigdeep.com. letsdigdeep.com. Thanks for listening.